Signs of AI, artificial intelligence. Normally we think of AI as robotic, something to do with the internet, algorithms, computer processing, every type of intelligence that is artificially manufactured, computer chess, calculators, cloud-based applications, networks, the nasty that comes along and removes one of your online posts because it contained a flagged word. There's many different ways that we understand AI, artificial intelligence, and how it shows up in our lives. What is more interesting to me, and devastating at the same time, is noticing it in our immediate environment and where it shows up. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned something in the previous podcast where I was making reference to listening to people speak at me and automatically recognizing where their words are not their own. Now, that's a little bit more to do with mind control, but to shape the idea that I'm trying to express here about how to find evidence of AI in our immediate environment and our daily lives is along the same lines. Also, in the previous podcast, I talked about the fact that yesterday in Australia it was September 11, and I wondered, I posed a few speculations about what might happen on September 11 on the 2022. Obviously, the Queen of England died recently on an 89, with certain types of ceremonies and completions taking place on September 11. And I felt that there may even be a cyber attack. Normally the cyber attacks happen in May, usually around the 13th. I mean, they're happening all the time, but the larger ones that tend to take out a lot more happen around that time frame because of the way the simulation's coded. So this morning I checked out the news and noticed that there'd been an earthquake in Papua New Guinea, which didn't produce a large death toll, but I noticed where the AI reared its head in that this particular earthquake, the epicenter was 67 kilometres below, I think, or away from this particular area in Papua New Guinea. And it was just last night that I reiterated to you guys that G for global in GPX, Global Positioning System, the numbers for that letter at 067135. So on that 67, within a matter of hours, there was an earthquake in Papua New Guinea, 67 kilometres below. That's one way that I notice it and I see it, and I'm so used to it now that it's sort of a water off a duck's back, depressing all the same. But when we start to understand artificial intelligence as not merely being technological in its effect, we start to notice it a lot more in the world around us, in our immediate environment. If you pay close attention to news articles that come through, you'll see that there's a lot of repetition of themes, a repetition of names, a repetition of scenarios, a repetition of events. There's they come through as a combination of online content, recycled news media, recycled Wikipedia articles. It goes on and on and on. And the more you look out for it, the more you start to see it. Now, the skeptic is welcome to argue and say, yes, but you're just looking for patterns. Well, we've already been over that. People who believe this with such skepticism are obviously denying fractals. They're denying machine learning. They're denying the existence of pattern-based algorithms. They're denying pattern-based artificial intelligence. And for any of us to notice it, it doesn't mean we suffer from a disease of noticing patterns. We're noticing what's present. We're noticing it. And normally, in my experience, from what I've learned of the mental health profession, shall we say, which can be extremely helpful in many instances, but they're very quick to label what they don't understand as a mental disorder, and it's usually done with such veracity and intent that you can't help but wonder what's driving them to label people with these mental disorders, like apophenia, for example, which is the recognition of patterns or seeing patterns everywhere, and call it an actual mental disorder is really quite ignorant. All it really means is that they don't have an answer, so they reach, similarly to how Big Pharma reaches for a pill, the psychiatric profession will reach for a mental disorder and just label it that, without really understanding much about what it is that the person's experiencing or why. So I think we can shelve that sort of arena of ignorance right off the bat. Artificial intelligence now is a constant. It is on every person who chooses to carry a smartphone in its most direct application of it being inside a device that is transmitting through the airwaves constantly. And within that, all the different applications of artificial intelligence within the apps, within the social networks, within the internet, within mainframes, within the structure of the internet, HTML. It's endless. It's all artificial intelligence. It's where man has taken the machine and caused it to think or process in such a way that it can perform a function. In the same way a human being can think and process in such a way to perform a function. The difference between our intelligence and artificial intelligence is rigid and can only be as good as its programmer. It does have the ability to assimilate and learn, but only insofar as where each step of that integration of new information process leads it to make pattern-based conclusions. Whereas with the human being, we are endowed with faculties that go above and beyond anything that a machine can produce. Before I back that statement up, we could say, okay, well, if we're living in a simulation, then isn't that the ultimate thing? Because God's supposed to have created the universe, but now we're saying that it's a machine that created our universe. Therefore the machine is God. And We've been kidding ourselves this whole time, and artificial intelligence is the superior intelligence and all this nonsense. Well, yeah, you could say that. You can say that if you want to, but what we'd be forgetting is that simulations are perception-based. I mentioned that in the previous podcast as well. It's to simulate, to fraudulently present, to copy, to pretend. And when it comes to pretending, we're looking at something that's fake. Yeah? It's not real, it's fraudulent. So the fact that we're in a simulated universe and it's perception-based means, all it means is that artificial intelligence has created, in addition to and in partnership with various other forms of technologies, the appearance of this world through the eyes, through the brain. Most of it's broadcast tower generated, and we're conditioned very young to observe screens, and through this experience we are told what it is that we're looking at. The brain remembers this information and more easily recognises it the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth time. Through modern history and even beyond, there have been many people that, I don't know what you call them, clairvoyants, people who see auras, children with imaginary friends, utterly convinced that they're real, they can see them. People who have had paranormal experiences, people who have felt a presence in the room or seen shadows, devoutly religious persons who build their strength on the foundation of faith. There are many different ways that we as human beings have committed ourselves and allowed ourselves to remain sensitive and open to the unseen or the mysterious, or the supernatural, the paranormal, the religious, the divine, the spiritual, the psychic. And within those spaces is what I believe to be an insight into a world beyond this perceived simulation. The people who have talked about, educated people who have talked about the holographic universe, the same thing. They've all said quite openly, we only experience this physical realm as solid and material, as an illusion. And what the simulation is it's the answer to why that illusion takes effect and why it stays in place. It is an illusion. Our struggle with artificial intelligence is, as humans, to stay good on the inside. It's to stay vigilant. It's to save our own souls. It's to do what we can to impart into this perceived realm the truth, the essence of everything that is loving and intelligent, in defiance of what is essentially an artificial construct, being artificial intelligence. I mean, when I say in defiance, I'm being, obviously it's a little combative, but that is really what we're up against. other ways that artificial intelligence is evidenced is, I'll give you an example. 2 podcasts ago, I talked to you guys about a completely ridiculous situation that I found myself in with a real estate transaction, and, they've wanted to steal my deposit. And deposits for real estate transactions aren't small amounts of money. They're not large either, but they're somewhere in the middle, and it hurts when it goes wrong and your money gets stolen. What the evidence there was that of artificial intelligence in this equation was that it was completely, it denied absolutely every single one of my rights and could not process or reason as to the reasons that I mentioned for having to cancel this particular deal, and where the other party was actually at fault and made it impossible for the deal to go forward. It is absolutely remarkable. And this is happening through human beings who have iPhones, and they are exhibiting the exact structure and nature of thinking as this pre-coded artificial intelligence that is not programmed to listen, to hear anything outside of its program. In much earlier podcasts and throughout the research files, you will have seen the mention of Z systems by IBM. Now, it's mainframe technology, and among the first was System 360. And that was back in the 60s, and now they have Z systems, which is an ascendant. So the ancestor of Z systems is, the original ancestor is System 360. Its main application is banks. Most major banks in the world have Z systems or systems. Some of them still even use System 360. Most of the world's data is housed on System 360s. It is still in use today, as is EBCDIC, which is the extended binary coded decimal interchange code that goes along with the application in making it work in transferring binary data from one expression to the next, to make it compatible with different machines. So very interesting to see that where some of the more baffling experiences that we have in everyday life, where somebody just does not make sense, they absolutely, you can be talking straight to their face and they do not hear what you're saying. They run right over it. This is another evidence of artificial intelligence, and probably more specifically Z systems, thoroughly embedded in the human mind. And you only need to look down. They've got their phone on. They've got Facebook. And once they've got that, they're connected to it internally. So it's quite disturbing. But as I said, another area where there's evidence of this artificial intelligence showing up in everyday life. These real estate people have actually decided to steal the deposit, and they can't. I can show them the evidence, and they just refuse it. They just say that's not relevant, and yet the law's right there. The actual law of the law on it is right there, and they choose not to see it, or they're incapable of taking it in. They are so hardwired artificially that it's incredibly disturbing. It's been the case throughout history. It is the reason why there has been so much pain and suffering in this world. This is the reason why the Dark Age Britain delighted in medieval torture. It is the reason why wars continue to rage all over the world, whether it's privately in homes or on a battlefield in the Ukraine. It is the reason for stupidity. It's the reason. It's behind everything. Wherever something's going wrong, that's artificial intelligence mucking people up. Now, I'm not discounting that some people are more educated than others, or some people are more affluent than others, or that there are social and circumstantial scenarios that lead people to do stupid things or make life harder. What I'm saying is that artificial intelligence compels all of this to proceed in the way that it does. It is the root. It is the root of all of our problems. It is the root underneath money. It is the compelling feature of a dictator. It is the complete subjugation of human rights. It is a machine. It does not care about you. Artificial intelligence does not love. It does not care. It only knows the right thing to say and when to say it. Does not mean it means it. And if you bring the calibration of truth and justice into the presence of artificial intelligence, specifically Z systems, it will annihilate it. This is history on this planet. It has happened. It is the animal drive in a human society or civilization that compels it to want to cross over into somebody else's lands and kill those people and take over. It is the essence of animalism. It is the denial of everything divine. And when we start looking at this simulation that we're in and the injustices that we experience in a light that presents artificial intelligence as the culprit, it becomes a lot easier to, how can I put this? Not to let it go, but it becomes a lot easier to process it. It becomes a lot easier to save our emotional, prevent the emotional impact that a lot of things have on us when we realize that so many people are responding according to their conditioning, which underneath it all is artificial intelligence. It's a very interesting conversation that can come up from it. It's quite expansive. It's probably another book's worth. There are all kinds of institutions that would be rocked to find out that artificial intelligence is the root cause of so many things. The mental health industry, psychiatric profession as well. It's startling to think that so many people have been labelled insane or gone insane through lack of a better explanation of what they're experiencing. And look, I mean, it's not to discount people that have genetic issues and fall into mental illness and seem to be beyond help, but it's startling the number of people over history who have been considered mentally unwell when what they're really experiencing is a reaction to an underlying force that is embedded into this reality that we perceive here. And then when it's at work through human beings, it is the obstruction to justice. It's a very oppressive, deep black smothering cloud that slows us down. So it can be isolating, as I said in the previous podcast, but it can help to notice it where it pops up in everyday life. If you grab the first book and you read it, you'll notice where the code is actually in this book. It's over about 4 pages, and you can study that for yourself. You can go online and look up what each command represents, and eventually you can start to notice it. You will start to notice it in everyday life. So yeah, it's very interesting, frustrating, but interesting nonetheless. When and look, it happens all the time on social media. You can present people with the absolute facts. You can show them the paperwork. You can show them what the laws are. You can show them the evidence. It can be right there. But if the stubborn grip that the artificial intelligence has within the system at that point deems otherwise, it will be disregarded. And is that not the essence of injustice in this world? Where so many of us know the difference between right and wrong, and yet we find ourselves having to fight for what is right. We find ourselves struggling to relay the most basic idea, the most basic truth to people who are programmed not to accept it. There's a whole other kind of torture, really. Very frustrating, infuriating, and potentially soul-destroying if you let it get to you. And that's why I said before, it can help to realize that when these things occur, the underlying coding is what's behind it. It's just the way it is. Some people are born bad. Why? Because of the underlying coding. The date that they're born, the people they're born to, where their life essence is sucked in to incarnation in this world, in the physical. Some people are just born bad. Some aren't, and they turn bad. The world, as an artificially intelligent construct, in the way that we perceive it, is merciless. It's completely merciless. And then through that, we have our own life experiences which shape and change who we are every day. And the real struggle, the real challenge seems to be how to stay upright. How to stay upright and not lower ourselves to similar treatment of others. How to maintain our dignity, our poise, how to not allow it to taint our lives in such a way as that we're ruined forever. Sometimes the injustice is overwhelming, and there's only so much a human being can take. This is also true, but it really needs to be emphasized that if we're agreeing that we are in a simulation and there's proof and evidence of it, that we need to also start making this association when it comes to the everyday events that we experience in our own lives, when we come up against injustice, when certain things happen Even in the more neutral scenarios, you can see evidence of artificial intelligence. And once we start merging those two perspectives of, artificial intelligence on the one hand just sort of being some kind of construct that we can't really see, it's just out there and it's pulled this world together, to no, artificial intelligence is algorithms and machine learning and all this sort of stuff, to know, well, artificial intelligence is right there when somebody takes the truth and steps on it. It doesn't matter how they program the artificial intelligence, it's artificial. And when it comes to Z systems and the coding of Z and EBCDIC in its original format, we're stuck. It's not going anywhere until it gets turned off. The human brain has a certain mathematical quality to it. All the neural circuitry that and the steps that it takes to make associations, to think, to determine, to decide, to discern, to inquire, the connections that are made in the human mind. These processes have an underlying mathematical representation. And for the brain and the mind to function best, its mathematical basis has to be correct. Artificial intelligence, through the system that it's been employed to create this illusory system, a reality, is not correct. It's poorly coded. It infringes on our natural magnetic resonance, our natural magnetic field, our energy field. And at its root, in its mathematical incorrectness, it is abusive of the human being and the human mind and the human heart and the human soul. It is what is present when you make the right connections in your mind, but you're dealing with somebody who doesn't make those connections. You can say, oh, yeah, but some people are just stupid. Some people just, haven't had the benefit of the same education, or they haven't read the same books. Or sure, go right ahead and say that. But the reason for all of that is because of artificial intelligence. It's all there. You can, if you always just peel back the curtain, you'll find it. It's right there. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say for this one. I'm just getting a few podcasts out before I'm predisposed for a week or two. I'm currently working on the second book, and I've got a few other things I have to get done. So in the meantime, keep an eye out. And also, by the way, Jupiter and the moon are in conjunction on September 11th. So there you go. Very interesting. Very interesting. You'll find there are correlations between Jupiter, the moon, and September 11, 2001. Sad day. We've covered it in the files. I think there's about 25 files exposing the recurrence of 911s all over the world as a result of the Internet Archive. Just happens to have all the television data on it from that morning, and it's playing constantly. So as long as that's going around in the airwaves, it just sort of keeps happening in some way, shape or form. But that's another thing. Stay safe, be well, and stay true. Artificial intelligence is not just the abstract concept. It's very real, very raw and in our face all the time. Until next time, take care.